Okay, hi. Morning. I just want to open with a quick word of prayer and then we'll get into it, okay? Dear Jesus, thank you again for this time to present this information. I pray that your words and light will shine through and impact any of those who are struggling with this and encourage those who already are very comfortable with the science and Scripture being interwoven and fully supportive of each other. In your name, Jesus, amen. All right, so we're going to get into some really specific science today, for those of you who are waiting, and that's going to be what I'm going to be focusing on as we go through the rest of the days that I have. So what I really just want to review what we've gone over up to this point, and seeing that we have see what we've learned and what the foundation is for why science and the Bible appear to be separated from one another. We will establish a clearly guiding principle as we go forward with our understanding of science, and I'm going to talk a lot about dinosaurs and people. So we've learned up to this point, we have this vast chasm between what science tells us and what many aspects of the Bible that seem to be in conflict with many aspects of the Bible. And I think we've learned that is the reason for that is a philosophical one. It is a worldview one. It is not a scientific one. We've seen that the worldview of the Scripture is being fundamental, of Genesis being true, the Bible being true from the very first word in Genesis to the last one in Revelation, was long the understanding in science and drove us to some of the greatest scientific discoveries that we've ever had. Some of the greatest scientists that have ever lived made their discoveries specifically because they understood that God designed what he designed in an orderly world, and so there's order to discover within that. The understanding then last week, we learned about the Enlightenment and guys like Charles Lyell and Charles Darwin that advanced ideas that were not only directly in conflict with what the Bible clearly says about creation, but were knowingly in conflict, and that was the purpose of forwarding their scientific theories, their scientific beliefs. It was not because the science showed what it showed. It was because they wanted to divorce science from the Bible and take God out of science and take God out of the society of the time. And why did they want to do that? Because they didn't personally believe in God. So you can't believe that in a scientific system based on God if you don't believe in God. And so we got to the point then in science where we are right now that what we call one of naturalism. Only nature, only what you can observe is real, is capable of shaping our origins, capable of shaping our existence, capable of creating, so to speak, our biological diversity, capable of creating life. Only observable phenomenon are capable of doing that. So God is not allowed in science now. God is not allowed in science anymore, and that ends up becoming a very huge Achilles heel for science, because there are many things that exist in science that we just cannot explain. I mean, things like why a proton has the same magnitude of charge as an electron. That is a fundamental physics, a fundamental physical chemistry fact that is unexplainable from a naturalistic model. Protons are about 1,867 times the size of electrons, and yet they have the same magnitude of charge. When you ask any scientist why that is, the answer is because it is. Well, that's our same answer too, but at least we can go a little farther. We can say that it is, because that's how God did it. Because in his all-encompassing knowledge, he knew that was the best way to do it, that is how it would work. And so at least we have an answer. It is miraculous, but to me, it's a whole lot better philosophically than, well, we don't know, just because it is. So that's where we will find a lot of downfalls as we go through this. And again, I really want to focus on the fact that the divorce that we've had between science and the Bible is not one that's based on science. It's not based on observable scientific facts. It's based on how you interpret those facts. One area interprets the facts based on the earth being not old. One bases them on the earth being old. All right, well then you're going to come to, generally speaking, vastly different conclusions about dinosaurs and people. If you believe dinosaurs and people, if you believe that the earth was created like God said he created it, then you believe that dinosaurs, that land-based dinosaurs and people were created on the same day. Therefore, they had to live at the same time. If you believe that the earth and everything in it is explained by the Big Bang, and the earth is about 5 billion years old, you don't believe they lived at the same time. You believe that they're separated by about 65 million years. So those have very, very real implications when you begin looking at just assessing science around you. So this is a quote from a geneticist named Richard Lewontin, a great scientist, but what we call a materialist. A materialist does not believe in God. A materialist believes that only nature explains what we see. Charles Darwin was an awesome materialist, and he even acknowledged that himself. But Richard Lewontin said, we have a prior commitment. He says a prior commitment, not because we are influenced by the facts, but because we have this philosophical commitment to materialism. Moreover, the materialism is absolute. Why is it absolute? Because it's backed by science? No, it's absolute because we can't allow a defined foot in the door. So again, that summarizes very nicely where we are. The divorce that we have is a philosophical one. It is not a scientific one. And so if that's my postulate, that science is divorced from God philosophically, not because of scientific facts. So I ought to be able to show that things that there are very real implications for that as well. Okay, well, if you believe that, if I believe that, then we would expect to see some evidence that people and dinosaurs knew each other. All right, well, maybe let's see if that's true. And by the same token, if dinosaurs and people did know each other, then there should not be evidence that they did. And so we'll see that. So if we look at, again, philosophically, neither evolution or creation is science. We hear all the time that evolution is scientific, creation science is not. That is absolutely false. They are both origins beliefs. They are both belief systems that have lots of layers that are wrapped into it, but they are ultimately belief systems of how we got here. And so they help us interpret scientific facts. They are the filter that go through our interpretation of scientific facts. So the picture that we're looking at here is a great big huge rock layer with a bunch of different layers in there. Those are called strata. And if you are a scientist who believes in evolution, you see those strata as being each individual level, and realize that although we see these great big bands of color, within each one of those bands, there are tens or 20s, maybe even hundreds of individual layers that make up each one of those colored bands. So as we're looking at this, if you're an evolutionist, you believe that each one of those tiny layers was laid down slowly over hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of years, individual layer. So we're looking at, geologically speaking, the geological time that we're looking at here is hundreds of millions of years, if you are an evolutionist. If you're a creationist, what you see here is you see that this is evidence that there was a massive worldwide flood, and all of these sediments were laid down very quickly, rapidly on top of one another. And so this represents maybe a few days, maybe a year, I don't know, however long it took to do it, but it wasn't hundreds of millions of years. So those are very radically different belief systems, very radically different interpretations of the same fact. The fact is, you got a huge rock sitting there with a bunch of layers in it. How did those get there? And we have very different interpretations of that. Same thing with dinosaurs. The facts are that you find these huge bones that are buried, sometimes exposed by themselves, but have in some way been preserved over time. That's the fact. The interpretation then is, of course, if you are an evolutionist, you interpret these facts as being, these bones are very old. Why do you think they're very old? Because they have a birth date on them? Because they have stamped on there, made in 65 million BC? No. You interpret that because that is part of your system, and you believe that because these are found in rock layers that have been dated to be 65 million years old. We're going to talk about the farcical application of dating of the geologic time column in coming up, but that was not a scientific practice, and it continues to not be one, and I will clearly go into why that's true. But that's why you would say our system is billions of years, and these dinosaurs are very old because I believe in billions of years. If you're a creationist, you say, yeah, those dinosaur bones aren't that old. I mean, they're thousands of years old, which is still kind of old, but you would believe that they were thousands of years old, so they're not hundreds of millions, tens of millions of years old. That's your interpretation of the exact same facts. And again, those have very real implications of what that should mean when you are now going to be picking apart individual details that go along with those two very different belief systems. So the guiding principle that we're going to get into is basically which one is right. Which one of those systems is right? How do you determine that? Which system is correct? And so we're going to get into how you do that scientifically. You begin to do that by weighing the evidence up against the predictions of each model. So, for example, our guiding principle here is going to be that there's no scientific fact that argues against a proper understanding of the Bible. Therefore, when science concludes, and of course, science is not concluding anything, these are people with presupposed, right? Richard Lewontin told us, with already a commitment, a prior commitment to explaining things without God. So these are going to be, science is people that have a commitment of explaining their findings without God in a world that's formed billions of years ago. So when science concludes something in a way that is not aligned with the Bible, and again, a clear understanding of the Bible, science is wrong, and an alternative explanation must be found. So what we're going to be talking about now is how wrong is science when it comes to dinosaurs and people. That's really what we're going to get into this. So how we do this is we measure our scientific observations according to the old Earth and the young Earth models, and we see how things shake out. So are the predictions that are inherent in those models, are those proven true as we examine the facts, or are they not? And there are some things that should absolutely disqualify a model because it has an absolute prediction. So whenever there is a scientific observation that absolutely contradicts the model is false. And that is, I will show you many different examples of how the evolution model is shown to be false by specifically just in this little world of dinosaurs and people. So there are the predictions within the evolution model about dinosaurs and people that if any one of them is proven false, the entire model is false because it absolutely cannot be true within the evolution model. And if you can show that it is, then the model is wrong. So when you get into dinosaurs and people, probably nothing is as controversial as dinosaurs and people in our world, because we know, we have had it hammered home, and it doesn't matter if you're watching a movie that like Jurassic Park or cartoon movies, we know that the Earth is billions of years old and dinosaurs and people didn't live together, and how ridiculous is it that you would actually believe that? I kind of look at it the other way around. How ridiculous is it that you don't believe that. And we'll see why that is. So according to Genesis 1:24 through 31, God created people and the land-based dinosaurs. There are dinosaurs who lived in the water, so I'm not talking about those dinosaurs. I'm talking about land-based dinosaurs today, because that's usually what we talk about when we think about dinosaurs. We think about the ones, T-Rex and Stegosaurus and Triceratops, the ones that walked on land. So I'm talking about that. So they were created on day 6 with people at the same time. So there is the incontrovertible conclusion of that statement in Genesis is that people and dinosaurs lived at the same time. Now, a lot of people say, well, why didn't all the dinosaurs eat the people up right away? Well, because they didn't eat meat. There were no meat eaters before Noah, right? Because we were given the plants to eat at first, and then we got meat after the flood. So there was no people. People weren't eating dinosaurs or cows or anything. Everybody was kind of living in harmony. After the fall, there are some implications built into that fall that we'll get into from a genetic standpoint, and I'll talk about those coming up. But at first, we all lived at the same time. We lived before the flood. We were living at the same time, and so you can't really prove that, but it's very reasonable to assume that if they weren't eating each other and there was no cataclysmic event prior to the flood, that dinosaurs lived right up until the time of the flood. Therefore, it's very reasonable to conclude that God said, I want 2 of every kind to come onto the flood, and so that some of the dinosaur kind, and although we freely admit in the creation science world that we do not understand what a kind is to God, so we don't know what a kind meant to God, but most of us believe that there were some dinosaurs on the ark that represented what we look at today as the dinosaur kind. So you cannot escape that if you are a creationist, that most mainline creation scientists believe that there are some dinosaurs that were put on the ark. And so that means that if they were on the ark during the flood, that means they got off the ark, and so they went back onto the earth, and they were supposed to repopulate it just like people were, because God told them to go do that. So there are some very real things that go into that belief system, that we got off the ark with dinosaurs, so we probably continued to live at the same time that they did. So that has very real implications on the creation science model as it does on the evolution model. So the evolution model is, again, dinosaurs and people are separated by 65 million years, because dinosaurs went extinct, totally extinct, 65 million years ago. Everybody knows when a gigantic asteroid hit the Earth, maybe. Something made them all go extinct 65 million years ago. And modern humans in the evolution model only arose about 200,000 years ago. So that is just a whiff of time. So that is essentially, we are separated by 65 million years of time. And there are, again, very real implications of that particular belief system if dinosaurs and people did not live together. So specifically, creation would suggest very clearly that we lived at the same time as dinosaurs. Yes, I know that one up there is a mastodon. That's not a dinosaur, but the great big one is a sauropod dinosaur, and there's a pterodactyl in the sky. So there is a clear suggestion that we lived at the same time as dinosaurs, and that, again, has very real implications in our predictive model. Our predictive model then would suggest that we may find evidence that dinosaurs and people lived together and that they are not 65 million years old. That evidence may be things like, well, here's an absolute thing. What if somebody drew a picture of a dinosaur before we ever started digging them up and putting them back together that looks exactly like a dinosaur that now we've put back together and we've drawn and they look exactly the same? What if we have that? I don't know. Could be somebody's huge fantasy, but we'll see. But that would be very telling. Or there may be some implications built into that. So if, for example, soft tissues, ligaments, cartilage, blood vessels, and blood itself, for example, are soft tissues. It's well known that the half-life, so how long soft tissues live when they are not in living systems anymore, they don't last very long. They last, maybe ligament tissue is the longest lasting, maybe it's cartilage, but it breaks down. When it's not in a living system, it breaks down, especially when it's exposed to the elements. So we know that it only lasts so long. So if we find evidence, for example, of soft tissue, that it may last, I will go along and say the half-life of ligament tissue is about maybe 4,000 to 8,000 years, which means that if I took a 1 pound pile of ligament tissue and just let it sit there in 4,000 or 8,000, let's say 10,000. In 10,000 years, there would be 1 pound of ligament tissue left. Half of it would go away. Did I say 1 pound? Did I start off? Well, okay, so if I start with 1 pound, after 10,000 years, there's a half a pound. And 10,000 more years, there's a quarter pound. And 10,000 more years, there's an eighth of a pound. And 10,000 more years, there's a 16th of a pound. Well, you obviously get out to some time where you won't really have any measurable soft tissue. It's maybe 50 to 100,000 years. It's a long time, but it's not millions of years. So if you have soft tissue in a dinosaur fossil that is supposed to be 65 million years old, that is a problem for the evolution model, but that is a prediction of the creation model. We would predict that you would find soft tissue in dinosaur bones because they're not that old. They have not outlived the lifespan of soft tissue. So the evolution model absolutely would predict that there is no soft tissue in fossils. The creation model would predict that there probably is. It would not be surprising if there were to be soft tissue there. So these are some things in the evolution model that I would propose that I think is clear are absolute evidences that evolution is false, that the deep time model is false, because you cannot scientifically explain, and the attempts to explain this are somewhat laughable, but you cannot explain why a dinosaur bone would have ligament tissue in it, or why it would have any soft tissue at all. That is inexplicable on a scientific basis. So if you find soft tissue there, you have a scientific fact that invalidates your entire model because you cannot explain that. Just like if you have evidence that people saw dinosaurs before we started putting them together, that completely invalidates your model because your model predicts that there is no way that possibly could have happened. So we're gonna get into some of these things right now. So what would some of the best evidence be that people and dinosaurs lived at the same time? Fossils, let's say we had a person fossil and a dinosaur fossil found right next to each other in the same layer. We've never found that. We might not. But if there were a dinosaur, a T-Rex right next to a person, and half of that person was in the T-Rex's belly, that might be really good evidence that they lived at the same time. Like I said, we've never found that, but that would be very, very difficult evidence to refute. Or if we had evidence in literature or statues or carvings or something, again, that were made before we ever started putting dinosaurs together. People have found dinosaur bones, as far as we can tell, for at least 1,500 years, maybe longer. There were attempts in the kind of the early Middle Ages to put them back together and draw what they looked like, but they didn't look anything like the actual dinosaurs do today. So if you have drawings or carvings or something from long ago, before we started putting dinosaurs back together, that match the ones today that we think are pretty good, that would, again, be, I think, pretty good evidence that it's there. And why is that good evidence? Because we do this all the time. When we're looking at forensic evidence, we have somebody describe the suspect, and somebody who's never seen the suspect draws them. And some of them, these are all like actual police drawings from some famous lady in London that does this for the London police. But these are all pretty good, and she did this just off of descriptions. So there is no question in my mind that the people that described the suspects to the artist had seen this person. The details are too accurate and are too consistent with what they really look like. to be chance, to be an accident. This, again, my conclusion is, if somebody were to ask me, do you think the person that described all of these people that were drawn, do you think that they actually saw the people they were describing that were the suspects? Yes, I don't know how you could come to any other conclusion. Again, assuming that the artist had not seen them, that's a big key. But assuming that the artist had not seen them, I think that's a reasonable conclusion. So let's go to literature first. So does the Bible have anything to say about this? Does the Bible talk about dinosaurs? No, maybe. But realize that the term dinosaur was not even coined until 1840, so it never existed prior to that, 1848 I think it was. But the Bible in Job talks about something called Behemoth. Now, Behemoth and then Leviathan may be a water-based dinosaur, I don't know, but I wanted to stick with Behemoth because it's just interesting how Behemoth is described. And the critical thing there is he moves his tail like a cedar. That's a really interesting description because people have long wondered, okay, what is Behemoth? We don't really know what it is. Maybe it's a hippo, or it might be an elephant, because elephants are really big, and we can call them behemoths. But I don't know. Do those tails look like cedars to you? Do you move that tail, either one of those tails, like a cedar? There's a cedar. That's a cedar from Lebanon there. Well, you don't know, but man, that sure looks like a cedar to me. I mean, even the proportions are even right if you look at that. So I don't know. The Bible does not say what this thing was, but it's just interesting. I think we've all found it very interesting that the description of it moves its tail like a cedar, and then you look at some of the larger sauropod dinosaurs, and they have tails like a cedar, and that actually, from a proportionality standpoint, kind of match up to what a cedar actually looks like compared to a person. So it's just kind of interesting. All right, it's an interesting thing. Again, the Bible doesn't specify that it's talking about a giant reptile, but it's just kind of an interesting thing. So if we look at Native American culture in both North America and South America, there are widespread common legends that frequently have elements of truth to them. Of course, they've been changed over time because they've been talked about, but it's fascinating that a lot of these descriptions are from Canada all the way down into South America and everywhere in between. Many of the Native American cultures have descriptions of events that talk about giant birds that flap their wings, sound like thunder, that come down and eat people, that pick them up and eat people. We don't know of any actual feathered birds that are that large, but there's a whole lot of flying dinosaurs, a whole lot of pteranodons that were that large. And so, again, not terribly convincing, but it's very interesting that these cultures all have them. Some of the descriptions of the birds, what they call the birds, also match what we've seen of pteranodons in terms of their size, the fact that they have large claws on their wings. Again, we don't really have any birds that we know of that have claws on their wings, any fossilized birds. And then this large crest that they have, this bony crest they have on their head. These are all very consistent descriptions of these giant birds that would come down and eat people. And it goes much deeper than that, but I don't have a lot of time, so I just wanted to mention them. So this is Bishop Bell's tomb. Bishop Bell was a clergyman in England who died in 1496. And this is just a picture of his tomb. He's, I presume, underneath that thing. But we want to turn our attention to that, to the brass strips all the way around. And he was put in this thing. Again, this is 1478, long before we started drawing anything that looked like an accurate picture of a dinosaur. So I just want to go through some things. This is always interesting to me. So what is this? What do you think that is? That's a fish. So these are all animals that are engraved on that strip. What is this? Bird. What's this? A bat. What's that? Dog. Pig, you think? Maybe pig. What's this? Okay. What are these? So all of the animals that are on this thing are real animals that were known in the early 1400s, except these two things. I have an enhanced image. This has been walked on for 500 years. So this is why they don't look that great. I don't know, but I'll show you the enhanced image in a second that highlights the lines that you just can't see. But it's kind of interesting that these kind of look like sauropod dinosaurs. And I want you to notice something. Just notice their tails there. And this kind of looks like the sauropod dinosaurs that down to some very interesting details. One detail is that the tails were, if you look at their tails here, they're all off the ground. We'll look at this in a picture, but the tails are off the ground for these sauropod, what look to be like sauropod dinosaurs. And also these interesting little spike things on its tail. You can see those on this one over here on the left. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Their necks are intertwined. I think I have a picture of that. Yeah, here. So their necks are intertwined, and that's not unusual behavior for at least for large mammals that fight each other or during mating season. Giraffes frequently will do something like this. So it's interesting only because we're going to see this return, but that's on Bishop Bell's tomb. So if we go back, let's go to look at these cylinder seals. These are from Mesopotamia about 4,000 years ago. Again, we don't know exactly what these are, but these don't look like any known animal, but they do kind of look, these are from Uruk, Iran, but it does kind of look like this Tanystropheus dinosaur. Again, we don't know, but I'm just saying that those don't look like any known animal, but if you look at this, compare the head to the head there, the necks, it's kind of interesting. These are no known creatures. We're going to go to one more place and realize there's lots of this stuff. I am just picking some of the things that I think are very interesting. So Angkor Wat is a temple that was built in Cambodia about 900 years ago. And this is it in the jungles there in Cambodia. And I want to, these little carvings as you look up here, these are very common around their doorways. So they carve a lot of stuff around the doorways. And take a look, though, at that second circle from the bottom, or the third image from the bottom, and we'll look at it bigger here. So what is that? Almost. What is it? It's a stegosaurus. So not only does everybody realize that this is a dinosaur, but you know exactly what kind of dinosaur this is because it looks like that. Again, this is 900 years old. Nobody claims this to be a forgery. The explanation of this is that it's a mythical creature or that it is an iguana with leaves on little adornments behind it. There is no doubt that this is a stegosaurus. Children understand that this is a stegosaurus. The only reason that you would not understand that this is a stegosaurus is because you know that there is no way that anybody could have carved this 900 years ago because we didn't live at the same time. There is no way that this is not a stegosaurus. This is St. George the Dragon Slayer. This is a book that was written about 1400. Dragons are ubiquitous in the culture. Words that are translated as dragon are ubiquitous in the culture, in cultures all over the world. And whenever they are referring to something, they are referring to something that looks like a gigantic lizard. So this is a lizard that is called, I didn't write it down, sorry. But this is a modern reconstruction of that lizard, and that, I don't know, okay? This is 650, almost 700 years ago. And there's lots of pictures like this. St. George apparently was a very impressive dragon slayer in his day. This is a tapestry from the 1500s that has lots of dinosaurs on it. This is the tapestry on the left. This is the modern reconstruction. That is identifiable as a Maiasaura peblesorum. I don't know. Maybe somebody got lucky. These are, on the left, is a jade carving from China that is 4,000 years old. And that looks an awful lot like a protoceratops to me. Maybe it's not, but maybe somebody got lucky, but I don't really think that that's true. Last thing I'm going to go through is soft tissues in dinosaurs. As I mentioned earlier, soft tissues really degrade in thousands of years, not millions, not tens of millions, but in thousands of years. So really by 20,000 to 40,000, and certainly by 100,000 years, after something is dead, no matter how well preserved it is, its soft tissues should be gone. So the thing that we find over and over again, now that we're actually looking and doing good science, is that there's lots of fossils that have soft tissue in them, lots of them, not just one. This is not a unique phenomenon. I'm not going to say it's the norm to have soft tissues, but it is not unusual. And the lady that first found this is a lady named Mary Schweitzer. These are actual pictures from the Tyrannosaurus Rex femur that she took, and she prepared it in a certain way, and all of her colleagues, before she found this stuff, thought she was nuts. Because, of course, there's no soft tissue in dinosaurs. They're 65 million years old, Mary. Have you lost your mind? What are you doing? So not only is there soft tissue, the thing on the left is a blood vessel, but the things in the middle, those are red blood cells. Those are intact red blood cells from the femur of this supposed 65 million-year-old dinosaur. According to Dr. Schweitzer, when she was preparing her paper and submitted it, she got a response from one reviewer and she says, I had one reviewer tell me that he didn't care what the data said. He knew that what I was finding was not possible. I wrote back and said, well, what data would convince you? And he said, none. That is not science, okay? That is not science. There is nothing scientific about that interaction. Mary Schweitzer did good science, found soft tissues in dinosaurs, but of course we all know they're way too old to have soft tissues in them, and there's nothing you can do, Mary, to prove it to me that this is actually soft tissue. It is soft tissue, and everybody knows it now, because again, we found it in lots of other places. So there is overwhelming evidence that people have seen dinosaurs. There is overwhelming evidence that dinosaurs are not 65 million years old, combined with the fact that the predictions of the creation model would predict that if people and dinosaurs lived at the same time, we would see evidence of that, maybe in literature, maybe in their drawings, maybe in carvings. I think we've seen evidence of that. And like I said, there's lots more than what I showed. The creation model would predict that we would find, and this is an absolute prediction of the creation model, that we should, not that we might, but we should find soft tissue in fossils because they're not that old. They're old enough that the soft tissues could last that long. Do we find soft tissues? Yes. If we flip that around, the prediction of the evolution model is that there is absolutely no way that people should ever have been able to reproduce anything that looked like a dinosaur before we started digging them up and systematically putting them back together. That is an absolute prediction. But we do find that. We find there is evidence of that all over the place. It's another absolute prediction of the evolution model because soft tissue does not last millions and millions and millions of years. Everybody knows that, Mary Schweitzer. You're insane for even looking. It doesn't last that long. It's an absolute prediction that it should not be there, and yet it is. Why is it there? It's not for some ridiculous reason about hemoglobin, the iron in hemoglobin preserving the tissues. It's there because the dinosaurs died out very recently, thousands of years ago, because the scientific evidence proves that. And it specifically argues against dinosaurs being millions and millions of years old. So this is just, in the area of dinosaurs and people, this is just evidence that we'll see, just one of the many evidences that we'll really pick apart, and I will continue to hold up the predictions of the evolution model and the predictions of the creation model and tenets of sound science, and we will see time and again that there is nothing in science that would subvert the absolute literal interpretation of the Bible. And there are many, many findings that should lead a reasonable person who is very open to the influence of factual information, should lead them away from the conclusion that at least, maybe you don't want to go to we were created by God 6,000 years ago, but at least to go to the point where these dinosaur fossils, they are not millions and millions of years old. They can't, it's impossible for them to be that old. So, all right, so next week, I think that what we will do is probably talk about radiometric dating, because that is probably a huge problem for people to understand. Well, man, if we got these dinosaur bones out of a rock layer that dates to 65 million years, it's got to be that old. Huh, really? Yeah, we'll talk about that next week, and how, again, just the fallacy of radiometric dating and how unscientific it really is. So, all right, I made it. Good. Actually, I have maybe one or two questions if anybody has one or two. Brad.
How do the scientists explain the soft tissue?
The what?
How do they explain the soft tissue besides this?
How do they explain soft tissue? So the explanation now is one of hemoglobin. So iron, they found iron will prolong or preserve tissues about 200 times past their normal degradation period. That's great. 200 times 4,000 years, that doesn't get you to 65 million. So I will allow them that, but it's not enough. That's the problem with this deep time. It's not enough. There is never enough of anything to make up for the real observable scientific effects of deep time. There's never enough. But that's how it's explained. Anything else? Yep. Yes, I did not get into that. So he said, can they actually find DNA? Yes. Mary has extracted DNA from the Tyrannosaurus rex. It's not the DNA. It's not DNA. We're not going to go into Jurassic Park of filling in the gaps with frog DNA and making dinosaurs. But there is intact DNA. That will only last 6 to 7 million years before it completely degrades into individual nucleotides. And there are long segments of intact DNA. Just, again, another evidence that it's not 65 million years old. That model is wrong. Oh, Mike.
I just saw on the front page of USA Today that a meteor hit the Earth and caused these fossils to be encapsulated. And it just blows my mind that they just put it out there as fact on the front page of USA Today, and there's no holding point at all.
Right, no scientific rigor behind that. It was just some magical event. The meteor hit the Earth and encapsulated all the fossils in some sort of magical preservation juice. Yeah. Yeah, again, these are the stories that they have to make up because they have to make them up. There has to be something to explain, and there's not. That is the problem. Now, maybe something better is going to come along. We're very early into this. I fully will concede that there might be something else comes along, but I know there won't be because it's wrong. There cannot be any explanation for that. Try as you might. I encourage lots of trying because the more they try, the more they're going to find that they can't do it. It's just like trying to create life back in the conditions that they postulate were present when life originated all by itself. The more experiments they do on that, the more they realize it can't happen. We can't do it. There's no way it could have. You're going to ever see that in a book? No. So I might even talk about that at some point coming up. All right, yep. No, Mary Schweitzer is Catholic and gets very wrapped around the axle that we use her data to show that why the Earth is not billions of years old. She does not like that, but she is a creationist who believes in evolution, that God used evolution. Yeah, so she does not like what I'm doing. That's too bad. Because these are the facts. They're just the facts. All right, I better get done so we can get in church. All right, thanks everybody.